When my boss invited me over for dinner at his home, I honestly thought it was going to be a simple, formal evening. A polite meal, a little small talk, and maybe some advice about my career. I was 23, still trying to find my footing in the world, and to me, my boss represented everything I wasn't yet. Established, confident, respected. I told myself I'd keep my head down, behave well, and get through the night without drawing too much attention. But when I arrived, things immediately unfolded in a way I didn't expect. The front door opened, and instead of my boss, it was his wife who greeted me. She looked radiant in a way that made me pause. Not flashy or loud, but composed, elegant. She wore a soft cream-colored blouse that seemed to catch the warm glow of the hallway light, and her smile carried the kind of ease that only comes from someone completely comfortable in her own skin. "Come in," she said warmly, stepping aside. Her voice had a calmness to it that settled me, even though my nerves were buzzing. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the atmosphere of the house. It didn't feel like a boss's intimidating home. It felt lived in, personal. The smell of something cooking, herbs, garlic, and maybe a hint of lemon, drifted through the air. In the living room, a lamp glowed softly beside a stack of books, and faint music played from somewhere deeper in the house. It was cozy, almost too cozy, for someone who thought he was just here for a business dinner. Then another figure appeared from the kitchen, her best friend. I hadn't been expecting anyone else, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. She was different from my boss's wife, her energy sharper, her smile a little more playful. But there was the same kind of mature grace about her. Where the wife's beauty was calm and grounding, her friend's had a spark to it, like she enjoyed testing boundaries just by the way she held your gaze. "You must be the famous young man my friend keeps mentioning," she said with a teasing lilt, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel before extending it to me. Her handshake was light, but her eyes didn't let go of mine right away. I laughed nervously, brushing it off, but already I could feel the dynamic shifting. It was only then that the wife explained my boss had been held up at work. "He should be home soon," she assured me. "In the meantime, you'll keep us company." And just like that, I found myself in their world. Two women who moved through the room with an ease I didn't know how to match, pouring wine into delicate glasses, setting dishes with practiced gestures. I sat down at the table, trying not to look as young and out of place as I felt. The music hummed low, the lighting soft, the air heavy with sense of dinner. Their voices overlapped in laughter, pulling me in, until I realized this wasn't going to be a formal evening at all. This was something else entirely. At first, I sat quietly at the edge of the table, doing my best to follow their rhythm without drawing too much attention. I thought maybe they would talk about things that didn't concern me. Their children, their social circles, things far removed from the life of a 20-something still renting a small apartment and eating instant noodles more often than he'd admit. But I was wrong. From the very beginning, they brought me into the conversation like I belonged there. The wife asked me about my family, where I grew up, and what I hoped to do with my life beyond work. Her voice was calm, thoughtful, never rushing me for answers. The way she leaned slightly forward when I spoke made me feel, strangely, like my words mattered. Her best friend added lighthearted commentary, teasing me here and there, but never in a cruel way. More like she was nudging me to open up a little more than I normally would. "You're too modest," the friend said with a grin after I brushed off one of their questions. "You talk like you're just another kid figuring things out, but I can tell there's more to you than that." The words caught me off guard. Nobody had ever said it quite like that before. I could feel my face warming, but before I could reply, the wife reached over to pass me a glass of wine. Her fingers brushed mine lightly, just for a second, but enough to make my chest tighten. She gave me a soft smile, as if to say, "Don't be so nervous. You're fine here." That smile lingered in my mind long after the glass was set down in front of me. The conversation deepened as the meal went on. They spoke of their lives not in broad, shallow strokes, but with honesty that surprised me. The wife admitted she sometimes wondered who she might have been if she hadn't married so young. Her best friend laughed about failed romances but admitted there had been lonely nights that left her questioning her worth. And somehow, they asked me questions that pierced right through the surface of who I pretended to be. Not how's work, or what do you do on weekends, but what do you really want to become? And what scares you most about growing older? I hesitated, fumbling for answers, but the truth slipped out anyway, that I often felt invisible, that I was afraid of never measuring up, of being someone who went through life unnoticed. The friend's eyes caught mine in the candlelight then, steady and unflinching. "You don't strike me as invisible," she said softly, and for a long second, she didn't look away. Between them, one calm and grounding, the other bold and teasing, I felt seen in a way I wasn't prepared for. The room, with its warm lamplight and the faint crackle of the record player, suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. And I began to realize, this evening wasn't just about dinner. It was becoming something much deeper. The longer I sat with them, the more I noticed the way they carried themselves. It wasn't just their words. It was the pauses, the way their eyes lingered on you when you spoke, the calm confidence in their posture. They didn't need to prove anything. They just were. It was the best friend who started teasing me first. She leaned back in her chair, a playful smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You know," she said, swirling the stem of her wineglass, "you sit like someone afraid to take up space, shoulders drawn in, eyes lowered, waiting for permission. Why is that?" I chuckled nervously, shifting in my seat. "Habit, I guess. I've never been the loudest in the room." She tilted her head, studying me like she could read more than I was saying. "There's nothing wrong with quiet," she replied. "But quiet can either mean strength or hiding. Which one is it for you?" Her question landed heavier than I expected. Before I could think of an answer, the wife reached out, her voice softer, almost protective. "Don't be too hard on him," she told her friend. "There's strength in knowing when to listen. Not everyone needs to fill the room with noise." Her defense should have comforted me, but instead, it pulled me in deeper, because it wasn't just her words. It was the way she looked at me while saying them. Her gaze was steady, warm, as if she saw more in me than I was giving myself credit for. Still, the teasing continued. The best friend leaned closer, resting her elbow on the table, chin propped against her hand. But he could stand to sit a little taller, shoulders back. "Look at us without dropping your gaze. Try it." Felt like a test, and my instinct was to laugh it off. But when I did glance up, her eyes locked on mine, unflinching. It was unnerving, not in a threatening way, but in the way it stripped down my defenses. I shifted again, awkward but willing, and to my surprise, both women smiled. "That's better," the wife said gently. "See? It changes how you feel, doesn't it?" She was right. It did. My pulse was faster, yes, but there was also a strange thrill, as if I'd been pulled out of hiding for the first time. The friend reached across the table then, touching my wrist lightly, just a brush of her fingertips, but enough to send a current through me. "There," she said with a little grin. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" I managed a smile, though my chest felt tight with something I couldn't name. I'd come expecting a simple dinner, but somehow these women, one with her teasing spark, the other with her quiet reassurance, were teaching me something about myself I hadn't realized I was missing. Confidence wasn't loud. It wasn't forcing your way into a room. It was presence. And in that moment, between their laughter and their eyes that wouldn't let me look away, I felt a glimpse of what it meant to finally have it. Time slipped by without me realizing it. What started as casual talk over dinner had stretched into a lingering evening, the kind where nobody seemed eager to check the clock. The music in the background had softened to something slow and almost dreamlike, the lamp in the corner throwing warm pools of light across the room. By then, I wasn't just sitting at the table. The three of us had drifted into the living room, wine glasses in hand, conversations weaving through silences that were just as full as the words themselves. My boss still hadn't come home. Each passing minute made his absence more surreal, as if the world outside had decided to hold back time just for us. The air felt different now, lighter yet charged. The wife settled onto the couch beside me, close enough that the fabric of her blouse brushed against my sleeve whenever she moved. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did and simply didn't mind. Her best friend sat across from us in the armchair, legs crossed gracefully, one hand draped over the armrest. Between them, I felt caught in a quiet current I couldn't escape, and if I was honest, didn't want to. Their voices carried a new softness as they shared stories not about their social circles or careers, but about the quieter battles of their lives. The wife spoke of how she once doubted her worth, how marrying young had left her wondering if she'd skipped chapters of her own story. Her tone wasn't bitter, but thoughtful, like someone looking back with acceptance. The friend, in contrast, spoke with more edge. She admitted she'd rebuilt her life after a failed marriage, and though she laughed as she told it, there was a rawness in her words that lingered after the smile faded. "You learn to stand on your own 2 feet," she said softly, "but some nights you still wonder if anyone will stand beside you again." Her eyes flicked toward me as she said it. Not long enough to make a statement, but long enough to make my pulse quicken. I wanted to say something profound, something that would match the weight of what they were sharing. But words stuck in my throat. All I could manage was a quiet honesty. "I don't know if I've ever really stood tall in the first place." Silence followed. Not awkward, but thick, like the air itself had leaned in to listen. The wife shifted then, her shoulder brushing mine more fully this time. She leaned forward to refill my glass, and in that small motion, her perfume drifted toward me, warm and subtle, stirring something inside I couldn't name. Across from us, the friend tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her gaze steady and deliberate. Her eyes held mine, unblinking, and the room seemed to narrow down to that look alone. There were words being spoken still, but beneath them, something unspoken pulsed stronger. A silent electricity, filling the spaces between our hands, our glances, our breaths. And for the first time that night, I realized this wasn't just conversation anymore. This was something far more dangerous and far more unforgettable. The longer I sat there with them, the heavier the silence felt between our words. It wasn't uncomfortable, far from it. It was the kind of silence that pressed gently on your chest, urging you to speak truths you normally kept hidden. Maybe it was the wine loosening me, maybe it was the way their eyes didn't flinch when they looked at me, or maybe it was simply the fact that they both carried themselves with such openness, sharing pieces of their lives like secrets laid on the table. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking before I'd even decided if I should. "I don't really know who I am outside of work," I admitted quietly. "Most days, I feel like I'm just playing a role, hoping no one notices I don't belong." The wife didn't rush to respond. She just looked at me, her expression softening in a way that made me feel both exposed and safe at the same time. Slowly, she set her glass down, and with a gentleness that almost undid me, she rested her hand on my forearm. Her touch was light, but grounding, steady, as if she were saying without words, "You don't need to prove yourself here. You'd be surprised," she said softly. "I used to feel that way too. When I first married, I thought being someone's wife was all I had to offer. It took me years to realize I had my own story to write." Her words hit me deeper than I expected. I glanced at her hand still on my arm, then up at her face, and for a moment I couldn't look away. The friend, who had been listening in silence, leaned forward in her chair. Her voice was lower now, less teasing, more vulnerable. "I thought I knew myself," she said, "until I went through a divorce that stripped everything away. I had to rebuild piece by piece. And even now, there are nights when I wonder if I've built it strong enough." Her gaze found mine then, Not playful this time, but steady, almost raw. There was no mask, no shield in her eyes. Just honesty. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening with the weight of their openness. They weren't giving me polished answers. They were handing me their fragility, their lessons carved out of pain and time. And it made me feel like my own fears weren't something to be ashamed of. "I'm afraid of never being enough," I confessed, the words trembling as they left me. The friend's lips curved into the faintest smile. Not mocking, but tender. She leaned a little closer, her hand brushing against mine on the edge of the coffee table. The touch was feather-light, yet it sent a shiver through me. "You already are," she whispered. Between her hand on mine and the wife's hand still resting gently on my arm, I felt surrounded. Not trapped, but held in a way I had never known. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible. And that realization left me both shaken and quietly transformed. The night had stretched well beyond what I thought possible. By then, the clock on the wall had long passed midnight, yet none of us seemed eager to end it. The air in the living room was warm, heavy with the faint scent of wine and the lingering spices of dinner. I sat between them, the wife close at my side on the couch, her best friend poised elegantly in the chair across from us. Their presence filled the space in a way that made the world outside seem irrelevant, distant. The friend was the first to break the quiet. She tilted her head, studying me with the same teasing sharpness I'd felt earlier, though now there was softness beneath it. "You don't realize how much you shrink yourself, do you?" I laughed awkwardly, rubbing at the back of my neck. "I've always thought it was better to stay out of the way, to not be too much." The wife shook her head gently, her voice low but firm. "There's a difference between humility and hiding. You have a presence, I've seen it even at the office. But you tuck it away, like you're afraid to let anyone see." Her words landed with surprising force. I looked at her, ready to deny it, but her eyes met mine steadily, with a patience that didn't leave room for escape. The friend leaned forward then, her tone playful again, though the meaning behind it was unmistakable. "Stand up for a second." I hesitated, confused, but did as she asked. She gestured at my posture. "Shoulders back, chin up, look at us. Don't flinch." It felt like the strangest exercise in the world, but the weight of their eyes on me made it impossible to laugh it off. I drew a breath, straightened, lifted my gaze, and for the first time all evening, I didn't look away. Both women smiled. "There," the wife said softly, pride in her voice. "Do you feel the difference?" I did. My heart was pounding, but there was something exhilarating about it, like I had stepped into a version of myself I didn't know existed. The friend rose from her chair and crossed the small space between us, her movements deliberate. She placed a hand over mine briefly, her touch light but confident. "That's the man people will remember," she said. Her words made my chest tighten, but it was the way the wife looked at me. Calm, approving, her hand resting briefly at my back, that made the moment sink in. They weren't lecturing me, not really. They were showing me, through their presence, that confidence wasn't arrogance. It wasn't about being the loudest or the boldest. It was about carrying yourself like you belonged in the space you occupied. I sat back down, pulse still racing, and for a fleeting second, their laughter filled the room together, warm, rich, like music meant only for the three of us. And I knew then, the lesson wasn't just about posture or confidence. It was about allowing myself to be seen. And that was something I would never forget. The hours slipped away almost unnoticed, until the sudden sound of the front door unlocking pulled us all back into reality. My boss's voice echoed from the entryway, apologizing for being late, explaining some last-minute crisis at the office. Just like that, the spell that had wrapped itself around the evening shifted. Not broken, but softened into something quieter, like embers glowing after a fire. I stood as he entered the living room, trying to gather myself, though my chest was still humming with everything that had just passed. He seemed tired, distracted, giving his wife a quick kiss on the cheek before heading to change. To him, it was just another night. To me, it was something I knew I would carry long after I stepped out of that house. The wife turned to me with that same calm, grounding smile she had worn all evening. "Thank you for keeping us company," she said, her voice gentle but layered, as though the words carried more meaning than politeness. Her best friend nodded in agreement, her lips curving into a subtle smile. "You listened better than most people twice your age," she said lightly, though her eyes held mine in a way that told me she wasn't joking. I managed to laugh, though my throat was tight. "I should be the one thanking you," I said honestly. "Tonight, it meant more than you realize." And I knew even as I said it, those words were too small for what I felt. When it was time to go, I moved toward the door slowly, almost reluctant. The night air beyond the threshold felt colder than the warmth I was leaving behind. The wife was the first to say goodbye. She stepped closer, her hand grazing my arm before she leaned in, her cheek brushing against mine in a light embrace. For just a second, I felt the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat against me, and it left me rooted to the floor. Then came her friend. She didn't hug me, not exactly. Instead, she took my hand in both of hers, squeezing it with a firmness that lingered. Her thumb traced lightly across my knuckles before she let go, her gaze holding mine until I had to look away. There was nothing improper in those gestures. And yet, something in them carried a weight I couldn't put into words. A promise that I would remember, even if we never spoke of it again. As I stepped out into the night, the cool air rushed against my skin, sharp and grounding. Behind me, I could still hear their laughter echoing faintly from the living room, warm, feminine, alive. Walking away, I realized the lesson they had given me wasn't just about posture or confidence or presence. It was about allowing myself to be vulnerable, to be seen, and to recognize that even in my uncertainty, I was enough. It was a lesson disguised as a dinner, taught not through lectures but through glances, touches, and silences that spoke louder than words. And as I walked down the quiet street, the imprint of that night stayed with me. The warmth of their hands, the steadiness of their voices, the electricity of being truly seen. A lesson I knew I would never forget.